privilege today to have with us for Meet the Speaker, Davin Salvagno. And Davin, if I did mispronounce your name, please re-educate me because I'm a slow learner. But we have recently met, I think it was back in the spring of this year. You're an inspirational speaker, best-selling author, a leadership coach, founder of PurposePoint and the Purpose Summit. You recently co-founded Heartcount with Gary Ridge, who many of our audience would know because our audience is made up of CEOs and owners. And this particular podcast is all about how do we help you get the right keynote speaker for your next event. And Davin is certainly one of those people you want to look at. He's worked with the Fortune 500, Division I collegiate athletes. He's written the best-selling book, Finding Purpose at Work, and he has a brand new book coming out. I'll call it Spring, since you now live in Charlotte. You defected from Philadelphia, where I live in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. But in the spring you have coming out Thieves of Purpose, the 12 mindsets robbing you, of which just the little snippets that you and I have discussed, I probably had 2 or 3 of those 12 things in my life, which would be interesting to find out how to fix them. I did mention you're originally from Philadelphia, you moved to Michigan, you recently moved to Charlotte with your wife Amy, your 2 children, and I assume Brinkley, your golden retriever, is at your feet.
That is all very accurate, Bill. Thank you for that very kind introduction.
You're very welcome. It's a pleasure to have you here, and I'll make sure that you and I know our purpose today is to help you gain speaking engagements, because CEOs and owners are out there looking for coaches, looking for speakers, and we're about helping them curate the best keynote speakers. So my first question is, how did your journey get you to where you're now a co-author of several companies? You're the co-founder, of several companies, the author of 2 books, I'll say, since it's probably past editing at this point, the second one, and you're a speaker. How did your journey take you there?
Well, it's a long story. How much time do we have? No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah,
So as you mentioned, I'm originally from Philly. As long as that's very kind. I'm 100% Italian and long-winded, so that'd be dangerous when you give me, an unended time there.
Oh, we're going to be a bad match.
That's But as you mentioned, I'm originally from Philly. It will always be my hometown. And so that they say you could take the boy out of Philly, but you can't take Philly out of the boy, right? So I'm a diehard Eagles fan, Phillies fan, Flyers fan, all things Philly. Did move to Michigan, and now I'm in Charlotte. But I wanted to become a teacher, Bill, and so my career path was to become a high school teacher. I love teaching people. If you follow any of Marcus Buckingham's work, he kind of has these different strengths that define us. And 2 of the things that have always stuck out is that I am at heart both a teacher and a stimulator. So I love teaching people new things, but then also stimulating how they think and how they feel. I'm also an optimist, right? So Amy would joke, we were just talking a little bit about how we're drinking gallons of coffee after a long night last night, and there's a couple drops left in my cup, and Amy would say, I would say that this thing is half full, even though there's a couple drops left in it. But I wanted to go and be a teacher, and that's not the career path that God had for me. I was on track to do that, and I got a job working at Costco, and I met one of the most amazing CEOs that I've ever met in my life. I met Jim Sinegal, who founded Costco, and Jim came up to me one day and shook my hand, and he said, hi, I'm Jim, what's your name? And I said, my name's Davin. And I knew his name was Jim because everyone knew who Jim was, and he had a name badge that said Jim, and he knew my name was Davin because I had a name badge that said Davin. But he wanted to make that human connection, look me in the eye, shake my hand, and I'll never forget that moment. I could still feel his hand in mine as he made that intentional connection with tons of people around him. And he said, Davin, why do you work at Costco? What is it that we're doing well, and what could we be doing better? He was a walking, talking engagement survey before engagement surveys were a thing. This was back in 2001, 23 years ago. And then he asked me this question. He said, Davin, what are your goals and dreams? And by working at Costco, are we going to help you fulfill those? And my mind, Bill, was blown. I'm thinking, Why do you care about my goals and dreams and whether or not working for your company is going to help me fulfill those? It was something that I couldn't comprehend and was completely antithetical to the way business and society was run, 23 years ago. But I never forgot that moment, and I became obsessed with wanting to be that type of leader. I became a raving fan of Costco. I would tell everybody about it. I worked there for 7 years. I was playing hockey with the vice president of Macy's, and we were having conversation, and eventually Macy's said, hey, why don't you come and sprinkle some of that Costco culture and mindset over here? And so they made me an offer I couldn't refuse, and I left Costco and I went to go work for Macy's for 3 years. And then the bottom fell out between 2008 2010, and Macy's kind of went into survival mode. How do we just keep stores open? And the headhunter called me from CVS Health and said, hey, we're growing quickly by acquisition, and we've got some culture issues, and we've seen some of your work, and will you come and help us with our culture and foster kind of this sense of oneness? And what I'd realized was the way that I was doing that was through purpose. I was helping people find purpose at work, align with the purpose of the company, which is kind of what Jim had done with me years earlier. So I went to go work at CVS Health for 7 years and had a great run with them and was on a career path to become their chief people officer. Had lots of conversations with our executive vice president at the time. But I recognized that taking that role would mean me getting on a plane on Monday, coming home on Friday, and being a 2-day-a-week husband and father to our then 4-year-old and 1-year-old children. And that I had to decide what was important in life and what I really wanted to do. And so I read a book called Halftime during that time on a flight back from a meeting with the president of CVS. And in reading that book, it really helped me focus on what was important in life and what I really wanted to do. And I kind of had a conversation with God on that plane and said, all right, I spent 20 years now in marketing, operations, human resources. What is it that I'm supposed to do at this? And I had the opportunity to meet the founders of CVS and learn what their founding story behind the company was, and was mesmerized, but what the founding story of CVS was, what their original purpose point was, if you will. And I'd given a talk on that in 2012 that became known as the PurposePoint talk. And I realized that what I wanted to do was I wanted to help more companies be like Costco, more CEOs ask the questions that Jim Sinegood did, help more companies get back to their founding purpose point like CVS Health and their founders. And so in 2016, I quit my corporate career, started a consulting company, called it PurposePoint, and went to go start working with companies to help them remember their founding purpose for why they started, and to help them focus on their people and the purpose of their people, of why they were there, and what they were doing well, what they could be doing better, and were they helping their people achieve their goals and dreams, just like Jim had asked me. Shortly thereafter, I wrote a book called Finding Purpose at Work, which was based off of exactly those things. How do we help people find purpose at work every day? And told a little bit of my own story. That book became a bestseller. I went on a speaking tour. I met some amazing other speakers and authors on the topics of purpose and leadership. And in 2019, we got the vision to start the Purpose Summit, which was convening all of these companies and CEOs who were truly leading through the lens of purpose, and different authors and thought leaders that were speaking about this the way that I was. And that became the very first Purpose Summit in 2019. And here we are 6 years later, and we're getting ready to do our 6th summit. And so that's the journey, Bill, and I'm excited to see where we go next.
So the Purpose Summit, the next one is in May. I forget the exact date, but I know my granddaughter's getting married that weekend, so I will not be able to be with you. But May 2025, what is the exact date while we're thinking about it?
So the full week of the summit is May 12th through May 15th. The actual summit starts on May 13th, but on May 12th, we're doing something called Impact Monday, where we're partnering with tons of nonprofits in Charlotte, and there's lots of immersive community activities that teams can do together, to make an impact and do team building. And then the summit begins Tuesday, May 13th, and goes Wednesday, Thursday.
Excellent. Impact Monday, we should get to know more about that so we can help you with that on CEO Zone's Generosity Zone, and inside our app community with CEOs who might be looking for ways to give back to their community. So thank you for mentioning that.
Absolutely.
I guess as you talk there, You mentioned a couple role models that kind of got you involved in purpose, but who are the people you go to? You mentioned Gary Ridge, so I'm sure he's somebody that inspired you, and you co-founded Heartcount with him. But now we've heard a little bit about PurposePoint and how you got there. What is Heartcount? Because that seems to be the new up and coming passion that you and Gary share.
So Heartcount is our newest venture that I did co-found with Gary Ridge. It was actually birthed out of the Purpose Summit. I met Gary Ridge actually through Ken Blanchard, who wrote the foreword to my first book. And then Gary introduced me to the Marshall Goldsmith 100 coaches and nominated me to be a part of the MG 100. And so we've gotten to know each other really, really well through the MG 100. Gary has now spoken at 4 Purpose Summits. He speaks every year. He's kind of a staple, different message each year, but he's now become a staple. I had the opportunity to go out to WD-40 and actually tour their headquarters and see their culture. And just before he retired as CEO of 25 years of WD-40 company. And we were having a conversation during one of our trips. And that conversation was really focused on what are the questions that we're asking people. Again, kind of coming back to the questions that Jim Sinegal asked me. And what we realized was that a lot of companies were doing employee engagement surveys once a year, maybe twice a year. But the questions that those surveys asked were really about how the company was doing and not about how the people were feeling. And what we recognized is that, people's lives are so volatile. I mean, I can answer an engagement survey from a year ago, but what happened in my life last week has a direct impact on my performance today. And so if companies don't have a pulse on how their people are feeling week to week, they really don't have a pulse on their culture. Leaders really can't step in where it's most critical for them to step in and help their people. So Gary and I kind of got together and said, well, what if we started asking less questions but more often, and those questions focused more on how people are feeling and not how your company is doing. And ultimately, if you do that with consistency, you'll know how your company is doing. And so that was what birthed Heartcount. And so we have a saying. We've now launched a brand new podcast called the Hearts Not Heads podcast, where we interview different CEOs and leaders that are exemplifying this. But there's a lot of companies that count their head count, right? They focus on, hey, we went from 1,000 employees to 5,000 employees, 17,000 employees. But do you know the conditions of their hearts? And so the challenge that we've now put out there is to stop counting heads and start counting hearts. And so that's our newest venture.
Excellent. So that's real new. I believe this summer, I'll say it started, at least in the United States. So again, the audience we're targeting are CEOs and owners looking to hire speakers. And in your case, you have the new book coming out. So I make the assumption that you would do keynote speaking around Thieves of Purpose. We haven't read the book yet because it comes out, I think, in February is what the date is, but whenever that is in February. What would we learn from having you talk about Thieves of Purpose? What would a CEO glean for his or her organization?
Yeah, thank you for that, Bill. I spent the first 10 years of this journey talking about how to find purpose, what purpose is, what it's not. There's a lot of people looking for purpose. This book is about what gets in our way. This book is about what stops us. Once we found it, why don't we step more into it? What's robbing us of purpose in the moment? And I think one of the mistakes that people make, and this is one of the big learning moments that I had even along this journey, is that people are searching for a grandiose purpose for their life, and which we can argue that maybe from a spiritual aspect, there's a grandiose purpose for our lives. But when we think of purpose more practically, purpose is not singular and grandiose. Purpose is plural and momentary. And what I mean by that is I've got multiple purposes. I've got a purpose as a speaker, as an author, as a business leader, as a coach, as a husband, as a father, as a worship leader, I can continue to go on. And you could say, oh, those are different hats that you wear, and it's semantics at that point, but I would argue that there are different purposes, and there's different skill sets, gifts, talents, abilities, insights, experiences that you're using in each one of those, and there's different motivations for that. And so once we start learning what those are, we also have to recognize that there are things that prevent us from stepping into those more often. So what I've come up with is that there are 12, and there's probably more, but I've identified 12 different thieves like comparison, competition, procrastination, fear, worry, doubt, impatience, indifference, unbelief. These different things that in any given moment in time are at work, and they're stopping us from fully stepping into the moment and being fully present in our purpose, whether that's at home or at work. And there's a lot of companies, you ask what CEOs can learn from this. Every CEO that I know, they want their company to perform well. They want their team to perform well. They're looking for performance. And the key to unlocking performance and potential is seizing more moments of purpose. And so my hope is that by reading this book and by diving into the 12 Thieves of Purpose, people will be able to identify more purpose points to step into, thereby unlocking their potential, increasing performance, and ultimately increasing their impact.
So you nailed one, impatience. I know quite a few CEOs in the billion and up revenue crowd. That's kind of my sweet spot, if you will, from my past. And impatience is probably the big one. And my team has felt that here at CEO Zones. And when I come back and look at a number and say, why isn't that number bigger, or shouldn't that number be smaller? So impatience is probably a big one. Do you have a snippet you could teach about impatience right now? Put you on the spot.
Yeah, impatience is a huge one, right? And part of it is recognizing that we live in an ever-increasing, fast-paced world, right? It's like time is speeding up. Society is speeding up. Everyone wants things faster, quicker, cheaper. They want results sooner. But if you really look at what's sustainable, when you really think of what lasts long term, it's the things that force us to be patient. And so there's a trade-off. There's very few things that you can have right now that you can sustain long term. So sometimes you have to ask yourself, well, why am I being impatient? What is I want? What is it that I want right now? Why is that important right now? And then ask yourself, if I seize the moment, whether that's me doing something, fools rushing in, whether that's, we had this old saying at Macy's. I used to joke about it all the time, where I would say, ready, fire, aim. And it was a joke. It was because we would do this all the time. We would go into the conference room. We would come up with these strategies and ideas that we were going to do for business. They weren't ready. We weren't focused on the right things, but we had to do something. We were impatient. And so we said, ready, fire. And then we realized, oh, you know what? We were off. Let's recalibrate. Let's re-aim. And I think about how much time, talent, energy, and money was lost because we were guilty of ready, fire, aim. And if we would have slowed down a little bit to say, okay, it's the old adage of slowing down to speed up, right? If we were to slow down a little bit and say, what is really important? What are we really after long term? And what do we need to do now to get there that's going to be sustainable? If we did that, we would have a lot less ready, fire, aim moments. And I see this all over the place. One of my favorite examples of this is actually when it comes to tough decisions with layoffs. And what I'm going to say here might not be popular to your listeners, Bill, but here's one of the things I learned from Gary. Gary was CEO of a publicly traded company, multi-billion-dollar publicly traded company for 25 years. I don't know many CEOs that have that long of a tenure at a multi-billion-dollar publicly traded company. 25 years is a pretty long run. In that 25 years, they never laid off one employee at WD-40. Not one in 25 years. Not during COVID, not during 2008, not during 2001, not one. Now, that doesn't mean that they didn't have any turnover. That doesn't mean that they didn't manage out people that shouldn't be a part of their culture. They never laid off anyone. And the reason for that is because Gary was incredibly patient when his board was maybe impatient. And there were critical moments, if you talk to Gary, where he'll share, we had decisions to make. If we would have laid off people, yes, that would have helped us make our quarterly earnings. Yes, that would have helped us get the results that we want now. But what we would have done was we would have instilled fear, uncertainty, worry, all of these different things. We would have damaged our culture. And then when we would have came back on the upside where we were starting to grow, we would have had to hire again. And we wouldn't have been able to get back maybe some of the talent that we had to let go of. And then we would have maybe have actually created uncertainty within our best performers. And so he time and time again challenged the board to say, let's not do that. Let's create a healthy economic ecosystem, so that when we do have those downtimes, maybe we're not hitting the earnings that we want, but we're not laying people off. And then when the pendulum come back the other way, we'll actually over-index and make up for the loss. And they did that time and time and time again. And it's one of the greatest examples of patience being tested at the highest level in corporate America.
So I've got I promise no tricky questions, but this could take a moment, maybe sip on that last drop of coffee. But what's success for you? You have a young family, a dog at your feet, you're helping people find their purpose. Two people come to mind that are other content partners here at CEO Zones, Deanne Turner and Eric Brooker. And they are part of the Purpose Summit, I believe, or have been in the past for sure. But what's success look like for you?
That's a really great question, because success, not that I'm demonizing it, but it happens to be one of the 12 thieves. And the reason why, and I referenced halftime earlier, is that there's a lot of people that are focused on success and they're not focused on significance. And so when people ask me what success looks like for me, I immediately transition to significance. Because as Bob Buford would share in halftime, you can have success and miss out on a life of significance, but it's impossible to lead a life of significance and miss out on what success looks like. And so for me, significance means stepping into as many moments of purpose as possible. It means, and I don't get them all right, but it means stepping into as many moments where my kids need me to be their father as I can. And some of those that I miss, and I wish I can get those back. But how can I make sure that I don't miss it anymore, or minimize how many that I miss? Stepping into as many moments that Amy needs me to be, present as her husband. Stepping into those moments where I need to be a coach, a friend, a listener, an encourager. Where are those moments that I can step into? Our purpose is who we need to be at any moment in time, in any room that we are in, to positively impact the lives of others that are in that room. So for me, significance looks like stepping into as many of those moments as possible and discerning what they are. And I think often we are guilty of allowing success to have us focus on the wrong things, and we miss those. Now, there's nothing wrong with having success, but I know a lot of highly successful people who have the money, they've got the car, they've got the house, they've got the title, but they also have a lot of regrets because they're missing out on a life of significance. And so my goal would be to help as many leaders, people, companies, cultures, all of those things, to focus more on those purpose moments and take advantage of those, because success will follow. If you focus on purpose, you focus on significance, success is a byproduct. But if you focus simply on success, you're going to miss out on purpose and you're going to miss out on significance.
Okay. I guess my next question is a little bit, you're training me today as well, as we're trying to introduce you to CEOs and owners looking for keynote speaker. But you've been in Charlotte just a couple months, and on Instagram or Facebook or one of those social media platforms, I forget which, you're out in the community. You've already got an Impact Monday in your mind for next May. How did you land? Because I think I met you, the boxes were still coming in the door. Matter of fact, you had an appliance coming in the door the day we met. And then I'm not sure how that worked out, stove or something. I forget what was going on there. But in any event, very quickly you had roots in Charlotte. Is there something that CEOs who maybe recently moved their headquarters, they've moved their family closer to the office, how did you get roots so fast? And your wife has a new job, and all those things have happened in just, I'll call them minutes in the life calendar. So how did that happen?
You're the second person this week to ask me that similar question. Like, how did you establish a foothold in a network so quickly in a city that you've never been to. And well, I shouldn't say never. I was here once 15 years ago. Two things: a lot of divine intervention. So I got to give credit. God orchestrated all of those relationships. But how he did that is important. LinkedIn is such a powerful tool. In fact, that's how, you and I connected. And you mentioned Dan Turner, and you met Eric Brooker, and even, Ken Blanchard, Gary Ridge. Like, a lot of the relationships that I have, a lot of that happened because I wasn't afraid to reach out on LinkedIn and just thank people for their work. And I think that's one of the biggest mistakes that people make, when it comes to social platforms and networking and all that. Everyone's so focused on selling, rather than just building relationships. And so, two things. One, I tremendously value relationships. I am highly relational and not really transactional, maybe to my detriment, that I focus more on relationship than on the transaction side of things. But the other thing is I highly value collaboration. And, one of the tactics in the book, one of the thieves in the book is comparison and competition. And so what happens is we have a tendency to compare ourselves and to compete with each other. And I offer that collaboration is so much more powerful when you choose to collaborate. And so I've always been, one to build relationships and figure out, kind of old Covey, think win-win. But I didn't really think win-win, if I'm being honest. It wasn't like, what's mutual beneficial here? It was just more of, how can I help? How can I serve you? And I love that about you, Bill. It's like, you've never asked me for anything. And in every interaction that we've had, you have just always been, how can we help you? How can we amplify you? We have this amazing network of CEOs, what can we do? It's never been about a two-way street, right? And so in the same way, I met all of these amazing people before I ever stepped foot in Charlotte, of people that were already planted here, they had already built a relationship with, that I was just simply focused on how can I either help them or amplify their message. Many of them in return, without asking, said, oh my gosh, we love what you're doing with the Purpose Summit. Can we be a part of it? Many of them asked me to come down and speak to their teams. Many of them bought copies of my book, all of those different things. Never asked them to do that. And so then when I got here, there was already just a natural network of people who were happy that we were here, but then who continued to say, do you know so-and-so? Do you know so-and-so? And so we talked about coffee. I feel like I have coffee every morning with a brand new person in a new coffee shop in Charlotte somewhere, and that just continues to grow. And it's just by focusing on, again, whatever room that I'm in, what can I contribute to the moment? How can I step into that room, meet the needs of others? And that mentality has just continued to open up doors to new relationships, new collaborations, new friendship, and foster the network that's growing here in Charlotte.
Excellent. Thank you for teaching us that, because that is very important. As we bring this episode of Meet the Speaker to a close, CEOs and owners that want to hire Davin, you have your website with your name. You have a brand new podcast. I think you mentioned earlier somewhere you're on episode 9 of Hearts Not Heads with Gary Ridge. Your telephone number is 248-536-4647. You can be found on ceozones.com as a content partner. You can be found in our app community for our members, CEOs and owners that are members of the app community as a content partner. And they can actually interact with you kind of two-way like we did today. Did I get all of your information correct? And we're also looking forward to that next book.
You did. Yeah, absolutely. The best place to kind of capture all of that stuff is on CEO Zones and at davinsalvagno.com. And as I mentioned, I'm highly engaged on LinkedIn. So if you're listening to this and you want to have a conversation, please don't hesitate to send me a message. Some people may think that, I'm too open there, but quite frankly, I wouldn't be where I'm at today and know the people that I have if I wasn't that open. And I encourage you to do the same. So thank you, Bill, so much.
Thanks for being our guest. And let's hire Davin. He's looking forward to 2025, 2026 calendar filling up. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Bill.